Hello there. Welcome to week 2 of these weekly Godzilla vlogs of mine, unscripted, unthought through, bad opinions. Oh boy, it is week 2, and this week we're all talking about Godzilla Raids Again. There's no way that's definitely not the Japanese title. I am suddenly compulsed to look up what the original title is. Godzilla's Counterattack. Okay. Neither title is better than the other. They're both kind of generic sequel garbage title, which I suppose is fitting because this in itself is a garbage sequel. Oh boy, loaded opinions right off the bat. This is off to a great start right here. Okay, so I didn't know what to expect going into this movie. Right, let me reiterate that part of my reasoning for wanting to go through all the Godzilla movies was to track its change from what's initially a serious metaphor for war and bombs and humans coming together and all that good stuff, transitioning from that into dumb giant monster schlock. I didn't know how long it would take to make that transformation. I did not expect the transformation to be immediate, and yet here we are. The very second Godzilla movie is, in fact, the first where Godzilla faces off against another giant monster, and oh boy, is it dumb! So let's just talk about the monsters themselves, because that's the primary draw. They somehow look... Godzilla himself, and for that matter, the other monster, Anguis, I don't know how to say it. The other thing. Godzilla and the other thing somehow look worse than the first Godzilla of the first movie, and I don't know how that's possible. I suppose it's not helped by the fact that they constantly have to interact, so the very human mannerisms stuck inside a dumb costume are much more easily noticeable when it's two monsters, humans in monster costumes trying to interact, and when it's just one dude stomping through a city, because the monster fights in this movie are not good. They look like they are very blatantly two men trying to wrestle and then just awkwardly rubbing against each other because they can't fucking see what they're doing. None of the movement looks natural. You can see the plastic body parts wiggling on their backs. It's a mess. It's a total mess, and it gets even funnier when they go in for the close-ups with the puppet versions of them, because they wanted to have shots where Godzilla would bite at the other monster's neck, but you couldn't do that with the big guys in the suit, because their heads weren't made to be very maneuverable, so you got to make the puppets for that. And then, but since this is the 1950s and this is a cheap cash-in sequel, you don't have the money to make a good puppet. So what it looks like is, here, you can replicate the effect at home. What I want you to do is I want you to take a pair of socks, put one sock on each hand. Now, move your hands like your, mouthing movements, yeah? And then take one of the sock mouths, and bite at the metaphorical neck of the other sock puppet, and congratulations, you've just made Godzilla Raids Again. That's how silly and ridiculous and look. And to be fair, it is quite amusing to watch, but seriously, I cannot take it. It's actually really hard to take anything seriously in this movie, for that matter. For one, like, the pacing is all over the place. Like, first movie had this slow build-up to Godzilla, right? You first had some disasters happen, people clamoring what the hell's going on. Some more disasters happen, you get a peek in the background before eventually he pokes up over the hill. But here, you're just two guys, they're on an island, and suddenly there he is. There he is! He's just there all of a sudden. And then the two monsters fight until about halfway through the movie, when suddenly Godzilla just wins the fight. And you're like, we still got half the movie. What the hell do we do now? Well, let's just go dick around in the mountains for a bit. And it's really not helped by the fact that, I mean, I guess this is kind of true of the previous movie too, but especially here, there's not much in the way of main characters to attached to. It introduces the movie starts with like these pilots, right? And then they entirely disappear for the as soon as Godzilla comes up, boom, these pilots are gone for the next 45 minutes until Godzilla defeats the other monster, and then we've still got half the movie left about fighting Godzilla, so let's bring back in the pilots. So essentially for the first 45 minutes, it's a mess of two dudes in rubber suits rubbing against each other trying to make their fight look convincing, and then all of a sudden let's bring back the main characters. There is a B plot running throughout kind of running throughout that first half that makes no sense thematically to me. And then the pilots come back, and then one of them makes a "Hello, boys, I'm from Independence Day," and it's a mess. But like that B plot, I want to focus on because it's indicative of how this movie is thematically much less resonant than the previous one. So this B plot, right, is well, first off, a little context. The one plan they come up, the people in charge, the one plan the people in charge come up with in order to counteract Godzilla is, oh, he might be distracted by lights or something, so let's send up some flares and lure him away. And that's working at first, so cool, right? And then cut to entirely unrelated prisoner transport, prisoners in the back of a bus, and they're just being transported. It's not made clear if this has to do with being evacuated from the Godzilla danger zone or if it's just coincidental, but we just cut to prisoners, and then they decide, you know what? I don't like being a prisoner. I think I'll just get out. And they stage a breakout during their transport, steal a truck, lose control of the truck, and it crashes into a power plant or something, and the power plant explodes, and the resulting explosion brings Godzilla back into the city they were trying to lure it away from. So the two things there, one, the level of coincidence on display is like, what even? But more importantly, why? Thematically, why? What purpose does this serve aside from being a contrivance to drive the plot forward? Like, if we think about how the first movie really focused on not only on the monster as a horrifying metaphor for war and the horrors of the bomb and people coming together and what have you, what purpose does this breakout serve? You see a bunch of presumably bad people we have no reason to care about accidentally causing even more bad things to happen and then dying. I mean, this wouldn't be so bad if this wasn't like an integral part of the plot, but it is. So what? And I realize my thoughts are jumping around here. I've got scrambled notes, but another thing I wanted to talk about wanted to mention how the movie's pacing and thematic undertones aren't really quite on par. Let's think back to the first movie and how that did not open with Godzilla. It opened with some disasters happening that were presumably Godzilla caused, but we don't see Godzilla yet. We see the human effects of the disasters happening. We see people panicking, worrying about their family members, desperately trying to find out what happened. We see people. Another disaster happens, and we see people just reeling with the consequences, really trying to just get themselves together before much later we finally actually see Godzilla. And then in this movie, we see a couple of pilots for a bit, and they land and they're on an island, and then all of a sudden he's just there. The day he is with the other monster. They don't establish any human connections, no themes. It's just, oh, there's the big monster. So great, thanks. And then the music. If we accept, well, of course we do accept it. We know it. If we think about how the first movie was, think about the first movie's themes and how the music complemented those. The music was very somber and chilling. And then we get to this movie, which has none of that. The music reflects it. It's a bit more bombastic. It's a bit more exciting when it's playing. Strangely, throughout most of the Godzilla versus the other monster fight, it's just mostly quiet with some ambient noise, which is bizarre. But when there is music, it tends to be a bit more bombastic and communicates the fact that this is more a schlocky, exciting action movie than a serious reflection on war. Speaking of making it schlocky, there's this one moment early on where they recycle, where a lot of the Godzilla footage from the first movie is just straight up recycled for this movie. The setup is some guy just plays it for a conference, and it's completely silent, but the effect is really weird. The effect is, since up to this point we've established that this movie is going to be a bit more exciting, by replaying the old horrible the old footage that was meant to be horrifying but making it silent and putting it within the context of the exciting monster movie. It seems to be communicating that this is the exciting action you should be remembering, like this is what we're aiming for this time, which feels kind of gross to recontextualize the serious horrific imagery of the first movie as an exciting action monster schlock nonsense, which gross, really gross. And that whole just being badder thing is also, you can see it at the end of the movie, where you can remember how the ending of the first movie was similarly somber. Yeah, we defeated Godzilla, but at what cost? What did we make of our? What did we have to do to kill Godzilla? What level did we have to lower ourselves to do so? The person who ended up responsible for Godzilla's death is just, he kills himself out of guilt, out of not wanting to have the responsibility of that much power on him. It's the ending of the movie is, like the rest of it, somber, but in this one, as soon as they finish, as soon as the hero pilot man finally buries Godzilla in snow, he's like, "We defeated Godzilla," and then the bombastic end theme plays, and it's like, yay. Sigh. This movie was one big sigh for me. I mean, it was amusing to see the start of the schlocky Godzilla action, but at the same time, it was so much lesser than its predecessor. It's like, I'm not sure I'm proud to have this on my shelf now. This is what I signed up for. Maybe I'll be more into it next week. Next week is Godzilla versus King Kong, and I know I'm going to be at least slightly more into that because I'm very familiar with King Kong. I'm going to have a lot to say about. I'm probably going to spend at least several minutes just talking about King Kong before I actually talk, separate from Godzilla, before Godzilla comes. I talk about the actual King Kong versus Godzilla movie because I've just seen King Kong so much. I love King Kong. Anyway, yeah, that's what I have to say about Godzilla Raids again. I am very weeaboo. I'll see you next week. Goodbye.